Hi, I see Mike Donovan here and Paul. Let's see here.
Hey, George, how are you doing?
Great, okay. Right. See if we can. Ah, yeah. May as well show a hayfield. Whoops. Yeah.
Good evening, Mr. Chair.
Hey, hello. And let's see here. So, Mr. Chair. I like that. That sounds great. And we'll wait until everyone's here and then I'll give us a quick introduction. I see Ezra Ron Tiberi. Hey, hello, Ezra.
Hello, here. Nice to see you.
Well,
Is
it's good to see you.
Is that where the goats and sheep are hanging out behind you there?
You got it. Yeah, that's a hayfield. We actually grow pretty good hay, and it keeps our losses to just staggering. That's really
All right, well, so if I need your attention, I'll just shout hey, and you'll know I'm talking about you.
That sounds good. That sounds good. Geez. So, and I think we are almost at 7 o'clock, and everyone shows up on time. And yeah, this is going to be, this will be enjoyable. And let me just see here. I think it should be.
Hey, George, it looks like Sean Reardon is in the attendees group there, if you want.
Okay, and we have, I'm not in control of this, I don't think. We do have someone from town government running this. Hello? Do we have a person here? Oh,
Good evening. How are you?
Hello. Hey, Sean Reardon is in the audience. Would you bring him into the panel, please?
Sure, just a minute.
Thank you.
Hey, good evening, everybody.
Hey, hello, Sean.
John,
So,
Hey, Paul.
how you doing?
I'm well, thanks. Yourself?
Great to be back hanging out with you in the evenings again.
Yeah. Some familiar ground.
hey, how did your son do in the skiing?
Yeah, skiing's a brutal sport, that's for sure. No, he crashed out in his first run. Him and three of his teammates.
Oh,
So,
that's too bad. That's well,
think
you need some crash outs to succeed.
Yeah.
Just
there's unfortunately there's no shortage of those.
you got it. Gee. And I'm just looking at our list of folks here, and I see Avi and good Kristen. And hello, Kristen. Hi.
Hello, how are you?
Oh, really well, thank you. Hey, Nadir. Hi. Okay, and I think let me see. Laverne, is she here? She,
Looks like as a attendee, Laverne Lovell, is that right?
oh, good. Okay, yes. And Nancy Green said she would not be able to attend tonight. She's got to, she's on the board of our the Land Conservation Trust here, so she needed to go to that meeting. But I think we do have a full complement.
Is there a way to bring Laverne in?
Let's see here. Um, uh, Town government monitor, could you bring in Laverne Lavelle, please? Laverne Lovell.
There she is.
Here we go.
Mr. Chair, could I ask who Vincent O'Brien is as a panelist?
Oh, Vincent, actually, he has something coming on.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
That's for later. That's fine. Yeah.
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
That's
Vinny
fine.
is
That's all
a
right.
local attorney, but he's not related to this. He's actually presenting something to us for the Meadows of Dover, one of our other 40B projects. Okay, I think we can then call the meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. This is a scheduled meeting of the Dover Board of Appeals. Let me first ask that our board members identify themselves with a roll call vote. Laverne, please.
Laverne Lovell, member.
Nadir Ahmed, member.
Mike Donovan, associate member.
Excellent. And George Chimento here, and Nancy Green will not be able to attend tonight. Yeah, the purpose of this is a continuance of our public hearing on the application of Tisdale Land LLC for a comprehensive permit under Chapter 40B of our general laws. And today, for those who don't know, who may be tuning in the first time, we have very good consultants that we have retained. Ezra Glenn, who lectures at MIT and is also a well-known planner. He is our consultant. He is actually paid for by the Massachusetts Housing Partnership. And we have two peer review consultants. And one of them, Sean Reardon, is here tonight. And Sean's basically his background is civil engineering. His firm, Tetra Tech, does this sort of work all the time. Sean has great experience with the town of Dover. And he is first going to present to us what he has seen with his first review of the application. This is going to be a process to help to educate the board in the esoteria of a lot of planning, not only civil engineering, but there's another consultant, Cliff Boomer from Davis Square. He will not be with us tonight. He has presented a letter we'll put on the website. But these two gentlemen, Sean and Cliff, will be educating us and also interfacing with the developers experts, because as they see things, the hopes are that they will be able to reconcile any differences and come to agreed upon designs. And so with that, Sean, would you please take over? Educate us, please.
Sure. I don't know about the education part, but I'll say what I have to say. We'll see how it hits. Yeah, again, my name is Sean Reardon. I'm a vice president at Tetra Tech. We're a large multinational engineering firm. My work focuses mostly in the Massachusetts, New England area. I spend probably half of my time to 60% of my time as a land development engineer, which means I'm on sort of the applicant side typically, but I also do a significant amount of particularly 40B review, just because I have a lot of the skill sets that help navigate some of the sort of the difficult challenges that come with 40B. That being said, one of the real critical things to understand about 40B is that it allows developers the opportunity to really push the limits of density on a particular site. So unlike sort of traditional projects that have a certain amount of, shall we say, breaks on them under zoning, 40B projects typically go out to the limits, which means, where under normal projects, we might be able to let some things slide just because there's room to fix things later or things aren't that super critical. With 40B or comprehensive permit projects, everything, the premium gets raised really high because typically the density is pushing the limits and there's really not a whole lot of room for mistakes. So we have to sort of amp up our review, amp up our attention to detail to make sure that things don't get missed.
Excuse me, Sean, one I forgot to mention, we are being recorded for anyone, who would like to later look at YouTube and see that you're a television star. But that is something I should have announced. Please continue, Sean.
Sure. And then at least in the beginning of our review, we try to focus on really the big stuff that has a chance to change the development program or has a really significant chance of impacting design. Basically, we don't want to be holding a lot of energy or spending a lot of time addressing fine details when there are big details that need to get fixed before we can get into the sort of the finer points. That being said, we do have a few significant issues. Paul's probably not going to be all too familiar with them because they pretty much follow the same issues we initially had with Red Robin. So and a lot of them Cliff and I have talked about, so they're common issues between Cliff and I. First and probably most important is the coordination of submittals. You guys eventually are going to be issuing a decision. All of the submittals need to be consistent and need to compare accurately to each other. One of the big questions we had is the architectural plans and the civil plans, the buildings aren't the same. So what we got to do is we got to make sure that all those submittals are coordinated. The civil drawings are showing exactly what the architectural plans show, and we make sure that everything is coordinated, in line. Secondly, struggled a little bit with the clarity and completeness of the drawings. I, as an engineer, could follow them and could sort of glean all the necessary information I needed, but they really need to get cleaned up in order to support the board's decision making. I imagine it's hard for you guys to read a set of plans, and we certainly need to do a little bit more work on the applicant side to make sure these are more understandable and readable. The other big thing is emergency access. Right now, from my perspective, it looks like there's inadequate access, either not sufficient room for turning around, not sufficient access to the exterior of the building, all things that we really need to take a harder look at before getting too far down the review path. There's a very simple exercise that's traditionally done in these projects where we have a design tool called Auto Turn, which is a design tool that allows us to track the wheels and the bumper of a vehicle as it travels through a site. What we'd ask the applicant to do is do a fire truck turning plan, where they take the town's largest apparatus and then do a plan that shows how that apparatus can navigate through the site, how it can turn around, how it can get around buildings and so forth. At a minimum, the applicant should be preparing that figure so that we can reconcile our concerns with the actual limitations on the site. Another point that we think is fairly critical is right now the existing conditions is a little sparse. Number one, I don't see any meets and bounds descriptions on the property line, which makes me begs a question as to whether or not the property's been formally surveyed, whether the boundaries shown on the plan are accurate to the exact dimensions of that parcel. As you can imagine, if they're 10 feet away from the edge of the parcel with their septic system, and that 10 feet is the minimum allowed under Title V, then that property line needs to be 100% accurate. So right now, I don't see any meets and bounds descriptions on any of the property lines. I don't see a surveyed plan. So I'd ask the applicant to see if they can provide that and make sure that whatever is shown on the civil plans and on the architectural plans is an actual surveyed property boundary. We'd also like some additional detail on the existing conditions plan. I say we because some of these comments were shared by Cliff. For example, like all that's shown right now is the site itself. As you can imagine, how the site and how the development sits in the context of all the things around it is probably the most important thing. We need at a minimum to understand the infrastructure adjacent to the project. So that means Tisdale Road has to be shown in its entirety. all of the utilities in Tisdale Road need to be shown. Right now, none of the utilities are shown where they tie out in the street, which is to us sort of like the name of the game. It's like, okay, how are you going to get service? We understand that your buildings need service, but yeah, how are you connecting to the infrastructure in the street, and where is that connection? Also, extremely important to have an understanding of where the adjacent buildings are. So these buildings are located right across the street from several other large buildings. We want to see at least one plan that shows the project development in the context of the buildings around it, so we can make some decisions based on that.
Excuse me, everyone is, I'm sure, taking notes. You're reducing all of this to writing, and we'll have that this week. Is that correct?
Yes, and it won't be a reduction. It'll be, my list will get bigger in the letter.
Okay,
So
fine.
these are the high points. Yeah.
Excellent. When you have that, you're sending this to all of these interested parties, and we'll post that on the town website, the Board of Appeals website.
Yeah, and I expect to have that Thursday, because tomorrow I have a full
okay.
day. So
That's fine. Thank you.
Also, like Paul, if you could, is to have some references to where the existing trees are and what's staying and what's going as part of a plan of development. Then I might have missed the details on this, but I was a little bit unclear. The site plans didn't really clearly show which parcels are included as part of the subject property. I know there's a Venanzos parcel, there's a county court parcel. I wasn't sure exactly what boundary constituted the project boundary. So if you could share that completely, Paul, that would be great. One of the last big issues is right now there's a lot of information on what's called a Presby septic system or soil disposal system. The Presby system is an alternative technology approved by DEP. In order to use an alternative technology, you have to prove that a standard Title V system works. So we don't really, Board of Health will maintain jurisdiction over the wastewater disposal design. So if a Presby system is proposed, frankly, the ZBA doesn't really need to concern themselves with those details. What the ZBA should be concerned about is, does a standard Title V system work on this site? They do have a plan for a standard Title V system, but that plan does not show a reserve area. So in Title V, you need to have an area for your disposal to work at least in one location, and then a whole separate area set aside for it to be replaced if needed. So right now, their Title V compliant plan does not show a reserve area, which to me is a problem, because in theory, you need a whole nother equal space that meets the requirements of Title V in order to make the project viable. So we'd like the applicant to at least demonstrate that to the board. And Paul, if you could, the Presby system is just, we don't encumber the ZBA submittal with those details. It's kind of wasted sheets. Then finally, we're missing some pretty significant information. Most notably, I didn't see a stormwater report. We as the engineers need a stormwater report to justify the stormwater mitigation that's being designed on the site. If the stormwater report describes how they arrived at the design that they have, if that work isn't done properly or has mistakes, then it reflects into the design and may impact the development program. So we need at a minimum a stormwater report that explains how the stormwater infrastructure meets applicable standards. Then we would expect a lighting plan and a landscape plan as part of the submittal, and then also a traffic report. I read some of the documentation and it referenced an earlier traffic report done, but I didn't see the traffic report in any of the documentation. I don't expect this project to be a traffic sort of significant project because of its access to 109, but it's sort of critical for having that as part of our review. Then a couple quick things in closing, and we can get to any questions. They did do a nice job of designating what areas are a state wetland versus a Dover wetland. Important for the ZBA, if you don't note, is the Dover Conservation Commission still has the authority under the Wetlands Protection Act to issue a order of conditions. but that only relates to the state wetland line. The ZBA is the caretaker for anything under the local bylaw. So that's how, you have jurisdiction within the area between the state and the town wetland line. So that's something we can walk through, but the Conservation Commission will always have the review authority under the Wetlands Protection Act. So because that's outside of the comprehensive permit. Same thing with Board of Health in the wastewater disposal system. Because this system is under 10,000 gallons per day, the review of their septic design falls completely within the Board of Health's jurisdiction. But again, only as it relates to the state regulations under Title V, not under local Dover sewer regulations. And then, so I guess in summary, our biggest goal, at least in the beginning of review, is the project viable as shown? We're just not sure right now, right? The buildings don't match. The grading in and around the building doesn't appear to be handicap accessible. There's no reserve area for the Title V system. We're a little bit uncertain on the boundary, not certain fire access works, and not really certain the drainage design works. So right now, I'd like our focus to be on just proving that what is on the plan is consistent and is viable before we get into more detail.
Okay, Sean, there was an issue last meeting about the size of the parking lot. It was undersized for the amount of people that would be living in those buildings.
Yep. Yeah, I did see that in the notes, and I haven't. These are why my letters usually take a little bit longer. I think your multi-unit residential requires 1.5 spaces per unit. I think they're slightly over that count. You're traditionally, if you're in the 1.5 to 2, that's generally in the range of what's acceptable, understanding that it's usually a question about marketability. In this case, we'd have to look a little bit further at that and see whether or not there's risk for sort of parking violations. Usually what happens is if they don't have enough parking, then it ends up impacting their marketability, or they end up having to rent to people that have fewer cars. But what I would suggest, if there's a question, that we ask the applicant to just document what the basis of their parking allocation is.
Yes, one thing about our Dover multifamily bylaw, which not essentially for 40B, but that really is predicated on projects being at least half a mile apart. So the 1.5 space for those where parking could also be on the street may not be a good lodestar for this, because we don't have any on-street parking, and again, this is there are a lot of units here between County Court and this. So yeah, that's something we'll need, something more than a reference to the bylaw for our other multifamily situations.
And you bring up a good point, right? So Tisdale Drive, as I understand it, is fairly narrow, 21 feet. So if like what I would look at is, okay, if there's a question about whether you have enough parking, I look at, okay, well, where is the spillover activity going to take place? In this case, it's likely to end up on Tisdale. It would likely end up on grassed areas if they were even available. If not, it's going to end up in the next available parking lot, which is going to be on an abutters parcel. And in this case, it's the abutters parcels are the kind of parking layout that could be sort of compromised. Like, it's not like a residential parking driveway where you're not going to park in somebody's residential driveway, but if it's shared parking on another site, it's very easy to sort of those uses to get mingled. So I definitely think it's appropriate for the board to sort of consider that as part of their decision making and condition accordingly.
And do we do that with studies? And is that something that you do, Sean, or is it something the developer provides us more deep? The developer's already given us, I believe, what they believe is the answer. And I part of this process is a give and take between our experts or the experts for this and the developer's experts. So who is going to get more detail about what is appropriate for this type of site?
In almost all cases, it's the developer or the applicant's obligation to provide the detail required. We'll ask the questions. And in this case, what I would suggest, given if their position is still that we're meeting the 1.5 to 1 requirement, I'd ask the applicant to just give us a summary of how they plan on managing their parking to ensure that nothing happens on Tisdale, that nobody parks across the street, in which case they can respond that we have a ticketed parking system, or we have a sticker parking system, or we have designated spaces. We just need a little bit more detail to understand how they plan on managing it. And then if we don't think that's compelling, the board can condition its approval in any way it deems fit.
All right, thank you. Board members, and what I think we'd like to do with Cliff not being here, and Cliff is the architectural consultant. He has sent us a letter with some detail. It was his first effort at this. We received that yesterday. Sean, you're a jack of all trades too, I think. Could you help us out with Cliff's letter, or should I instead maybe read parts of that? It will be part of the record and will be posted on the board's website shortly.
No, I'm comfortable. Cliff and I work together quite often. He and I sort of, our two services overlap. Obviously, the way the site and the building interact is a critical component, and we work pretty closely together, understanding your issues. And also, we bounce things off each other. Are you seeing this the same way I'm seeing this? And so Cliff and I coordinate pretty closely. A lot of Cliff's comments sort of run the same sort of spectrum as mine, which is, we need some more detail in certain areas. As it relates to Cliff, number one with him, again, was the coordination of the architecturals and the site plan. It is absolutely unacceptable for the site plan to show a different building than the architectural drawings show. We're going to get down to some pretty granular things, because of the site and how tight it is to property boundaries. We have to know where every entrance is to make sure that every entrance is accessible by the fire department, accessible by whoever, whether or not a handicapped person needs to get there. So we're going to get pretty granular when it gets to the end of this. So we need to make sure everything matches up, because we can't have two plans in a decision that show conflicting information. Cliff also asked for the landscape plan, the lighting plan. I also think Cliff mentioned some of the other sort of missing details, whether related to trees or things like that. I think big part on Cliff's letter was that he needs some more detail on the building materials, the building construction type, basically to sort of amp up the detail on what is actually being committed to by the applicant in terms of materials of construction. He even went into talk about grading plan, which again is a crossover thing for us. But most of the things I've already discussed, but to the extent that there's detail missing related to architectural features, Cliff asked for that as well, including a roof plan, because you can imagine if there's mechanical systems on the roof, that's pretty important to understand as it relates to potential impacts to abutters. But it's a good list of initial things that we need to get before we can get into any really sort of heavier lifts of our review.
He also mentioned fire suppression plan and a lot more detail around trash storage, snow storage, that kind of stuff, which, I don't think we need to hit right now, but we need to know where that's going to go when we get to those later stages.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, board members. Oh yes, good. In fact, Laverne, you anticipated this. Go ahead, please, with your questions.
Okay, well, the last meeting that we had, there was much discussion whether that they have the right to use the Tisdale Drive. Did they clear that up? Whether they had the right to use that street that's owned by the condominium complex that's already been there?
Well,
very narrow, not able to expand, no place to put sidewalks. We had a long discussion about that.
That's obviously, I think, Laverne, that is a hugely important issue. Right now, I believe at this stage, and that the parties have had some discussions, and what we'll do at a certain point, I'd like to first address these engineering comments that we've got from our two peer people. Then Dylan, who is here representing the neighbors, may talk and elaborate on discussions that he has had with Tanya, I think, in the development team about the road and other things. But I think at that stage, I'd like to hear more about these engineering questions first, simply because we've got Sean here. And that, but I do have a related question to the road. And one is the concern about turnaround. I mean, right now, there is no turnaround for the existing county court condominium. But we're going to now have many more people here, many more units. And there were two things I know that all of us were concerned about. One, of course, is the safety. If you have more children walking on the road and with no sidewalks, that was one issue that is going to be addressed more, I believe, by Sean. The turnaround part for the fire trucks. Sean, the school buses right now, since there is no turnaround, they actually pick the kids up at 109. And so everyone walks down and it kind of clogs there for a bit with the existing community. We're going to have more. So in the course of needing a turnaround plan for fire trucks, and this is sort of throwing this over to Paul, I would think anything that can accommodate a fire truck would probably be able to accommodate a school bus. And I'm wondering if that could be thrown into the hopper, some sort of turnaround to accommodate all those large vehicles.
Yeah, you're right, Chair Chimento. The fire truck is typically the heavy lift. So usually it accommodates most other things, but once we know that the fire truck can be accommodated, it sort of opens up the table to the other points of discussion. To Laverne's point, we as the engineers sort of don't get involved too much in the legal decisions as to whether someone has a right to use a street. But we very much do need to understand whether the street as provided is capable of providing the access required for this facility. So it goes back to our point. We need to understand very clearly what infrastructure adjacent to the site is available and usable for the project. Otherwise, we can't reach those decisions. For example, if it's only 21 feet wide, where a traditional roadway is 24 feet, that means we've got to be really careful about where a pedestrian's walking if they're walking on the side of the road, where are bicycles going, where are fire trucks going if a car is illegally parked. So we really need to understand, the extent to which infrastructure adjacent to the project is serving the project, and to the extent that that infrastructure is within property that is accessible is a sort of a supplementary issue, but it needs to be identified. So, for example, if the area in question over which they have access is only 20 feet wide, then we're going to have a whole other series of questions, which is, well, 20 feet doesn't give us enough room. So it doesn't matter if they've got access to the 20 feet, they need more than 20 feet. So the two situations will sort of play into each other. We are very much concerned with what's available physically to serve the project, and if that's accessible or usable by the project can be determined by somebody else.
Paul wanted to speak. Yes, please, Paul.
Yeah, so I just want to clarify that we just received these comments this morning, kind of informally. We received the ones with regard to the architecture yesterday, so we haven't had a chance to properly review them and respond. I know a lot of the things that are asked for, I believe a certain amount of them have been provided. We certainly provided the traffic report. We, to the best of my knowledge, because we certainly have it, a landscape and lighting, and I understand we submitted it. I don't know, Sean, what you were provided with. So there may be some documents that we provided to the town that you have not seen or had a chance to review yet.
Well, on the traffic report, was that something that was submitted in 2023? When
No, it was submitted as part of our application.
Because I
recently.
see in the I see allusions to the report, but the report itself, is there a full report?
Yes,
Paul, what
which
I would
to the best of
suggest,
my knowledge was submitted as part of our application.
Okay.
We had Van Asten Associates complete a traffic study as part of, they did it probably in October, I believe, last year. So it was of 2024. So it was submitted as part of this application.
Okay. Yeah.
Chair,
because-
if I could
Well,
suggest,
you didn't think it was sufficient. I don't believe, but that sort of thing, my thought is that at this stage, the peer review experts are going to have an ongoing communication with the developer without needing us to be middlemen in that process. What I would like to hear at our next meeting is that we have gone really far along in this process, and I think that's the most efficient way. Professionals talking with professionals, and then presenting us something to evaluate that's really had that type of review. So, and do I understand the process correctly? Is that the way you would proceed, or do we need to?
I think that does make sense. I mean, the only thing I would also just point out to Paul's point is this isn't like a high school classroom where you're getting in trouble for having something in late. Maybe it was in, maybe it wasn't, but we just need to be sure that the peer reviewers have it and that we all agree that's the one document. So if you've submitted it and it's sitting on a desk in town hall, let's just make sure everyone knows where it is and that we get it ideally electronically up on the web and to Sean, to Cliff, to the board, and ideally even to the residents as well, just online.
Yeah, absolutely. From our point of view, what my point was, I believe we have a certain amount of these, and it's easy for us to start sending them, forwarding them to Sean, and
that's great.
making them public. Also, there are some, additional things that the adjacent buildings, that sort of thing. That's something I'll have to get our surveyor to prepare. It's not something we had anticipated, but that's an easy lift also.
Sure.
So for the most part, it's a case of tidying up and providing the additional information. Nothing that we wouldn't expect or nothing that's complicated.
Perfect.
and Paul, if I could suggest, what I typically try to do is when the ZBA maintains a website of all the documents, I try to limit my review to what's available to the public, just to sort of make sure I'm not commenting on information that's not part of the record.
Yep.
If you could just scrub through the ZBA's website, and if there's missing information in there, just reach out to the town and just give them a copy of what's missing, and then they can post it, and then it's all part of the record, and I know exactly what's available.
That's fine. And just to clarify on the road issue and on the sidewalk issue and stuff like that, we have had communications directly with the Tisdale Drive board, and this is obviously one of their key topics. So it is something that everybody is aware of, and it is something that is being worked on or being discussed at least.
Excellent. Dylan, you are here certainly representing the trust. Is there anything you'd like to add to this?
Also, George, you do have a few board members with hands.
And don't feel prejudiced if you don't today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe Tanya and Michael had their hand raised even before, so I'm happy to let them speak as well. But yes, there were a few points like that.
Okay. Well, let's see here. Michael, go ahead. You're a board member. You have precedence.
Good, thank you. First, the board historically does a site visit. So we need to schedule one before we get hit with a very deep snowstorm.
we will do that, but I think we need. Don't you think we can certainly have a site visit anytime. In fact, but I'd like us to really have a better idea what our experts think about the site, especially Sean, because he is, his issues are ones I think that are of most concern to the neighborhood.
Well, historically, the board asks the applicant to put down stakes, basically staking out the corners of the building. So you see pretty much where they're going to be sited, in relation to each other, and also, in relation to county court condos. So
I agree with that. It sounds right now there's some concern about where the building is based on what's been submitted so far.
I mean, it's probably going to be relatively close, plus or minus 5 feet is probably, something that, we're not going to be able to discern while they're looking at stakes, but being able to see the footprint, where it is in relation and kind of understanding, the looking around at the terrain and understanding, how much dirt's going to be moved and
Right.
Basically how the thing's going to be developed is a big deal, but you have to do it on site.
Yeah.
And
I'm thinking more than one. I just, whether we should be doing that now or waiting at least a few weeks for these experts all to collaborate and come up with something more definitive. Our hearing continues really until early May and could be extended if parties agreed.
I can just say that the board historically does them early so that they have essentially some context in which to understand the project and the people and what they're doing and how they're doing it. So
okay, well let's discuss that a bit, and we'll I'm not averse to doing that now, Mike, and sometimes what history changes. I want to be as efficient as possible with everyone.
Okay.
George, if I
I also have a couple other comments I want to make if you bear with me. Rewind the clock back to Red Robin Pastures, and I sitting in the seat, I squawked at Mr. McGovern's height of his building, 3.5 stories. And okay, so he got his 3.5-story building, and it's a monstrosity. Now, these two other buildings are 4.5 stories and 5.5 stories. And as I sat here 2 years ago, I said, if we give them 3.5 stories, the next increment up is 4.5 and 5.5. And what have we got now? 4.5 and 5.5 story buildings. So I know Cliff is the architectural consultant, but I think he's more of a rubber stamp for the 40B projects rather than saying, 5.5 and 4.5 stories are really big. It's a really, sparsely populated single family residence neighborhood. So why so tall other than a lucrative cash flow from the apartments? I mean, why does it have to be that tall? I mean, if he needs more, apartments to rent out, spread out the footprint of the building and add more apartments on the first, second, and third floors. But I think anything taller than 3.5 stories, just violates, the town, but it also violates the intention of 40B, right? If we go far enough along, like 10 years down the road, if they keep incrementing up 1 story, 2 stories, we're going to have co-op city like you see in the Bronx. It's just going to be, high rises built on, land in single family residence neighborhoods. And that's wrong.
Okay.
So I have another comment, and this comment is primarily for the board and for the county court people that are on the call. We hit on it before that Mr. McGovern, still has, a road that's claimed to be private, on his plan. He's not varying from it. Mr. Brown gave us a, good synopsis of why that road is considered private. And the town of Dover issued a 73-page report that also said the road is private, but Mr. McGovern's ignoring that, and we should ask him why he's ignoring that fact. I also want to say that Tisdale Drive, just my background to people that don't know me, I'm a registered professional engineer, state of Massachusetts, kind of like Sean Reardon. And I have some thoughts and analyses for the residents of County Court to consider. Tisdale Drive will be the primary input-output for this project, and the people of County Court will have to live with traffic. The road is narrow. I think Sean said it was 21 feet. I'd be surprised if it was that wide. It's a very narrow road. One of the things to consider first is Mr. McGovern is going to be trucking in some really big pieces of earth moving and tree removing equipment. And the entrance to Tisdale Drive off of 109, the turning radii are sharp and there's a center island there. If you just stand there and look at the big trucks towing big trailers with big equipment on it, that entire entrance, the center island and the turning radii into Tisdale Drive are going to get destroyed. There's no way around it. And the width of the road, if you get two big trucks towing two big trailers that have to pass each other on Tisdale Drive, the trucks are naturally going to widen the path down to the project. And that's going to be on the shoulders of the road, which is essentially grass and dirt. And you know what that's going to do. So I think that's going to be a big problem that no one's thinking about right now. The cul-de-sac at the end of Tisdale Drive is going to be opened up 200 plus feet. So it's going to be a wide scar or a wide clearing that's basically going to destroy the current little turnaround at the end of Tisdale. So let's talk about the actual road. Tisdale Drive was put in, looked like to be in like the mid-90s. It was put in as a private road. So the developer of County Court, did he conform to Mass State highway standards in putting that road in because it's private? Or did he just do it so it was good enough to support residential traffic? I don't know which one it is, but I'm willing to bet that he probably saved money by just putting adequate in. And adequate is going to get destroyed when you have all these big trucks hauling in all this heavy lift equipment, and also the equipment that has to go in and out of Tisdale Drive on a daily basis. Being a registered professional engineer, I'm going to predict that the rolling pressure wave from the tires and the trucks and the heavy lift stuff is going to eventually crack, and it's going to break the existing asphalt or whatever's underneath it. And over a period of months, that road is going to become a broken up, potholed, dusty, and muddy mess. And the question is, what's Mr. McGovern going to do about that? Because there are people there that have children, and they have to drive on that road to get in and out for, errands and for school and for work. If his trucks destroy the surface of the road, who's going to be responsible for repairing that? Now let's go to the end of the project. At the end of the project, Mr. McGovern gets his way. He uses that road, and he says, okay, I used the road. Who's going to repair it? Who's going to make that road, good again for other people to use? He's going to throw it out to the town of Dover. So the Dover residents have to finance a road that he destroyed, or is he going to give it to the Tisdale Drive Homeowners Association for them to fix because he used it, not his problem?
Mike, thank you. Certainly, and this is somewhat a question for the lawyers and whether this gets negotiated, goes to court. We're not going to decide if it's a private road or if it's a road that belongs to the town, and where the responsibilities for repairing are the town. I think certainly if it is a private road, then at that point, I think unless there is permission to the developer, that pretty well
Well,
ends
Mr.
the project. Let me,
He's not changing course.
but
So
listen, why don't we let the two lawyers, Tanya and Dylan, address, because you're obviously, I mean, the road itself is a big issue, and whether it's the town or whether it's, I mean, that is something we aren't going to decide. But if it is a road that's going to be used for this project, yeah, there will be some requirements, but there are some legal obstacles. So Tanya, you've got your hand up, and why don't you address this concern, and then I
yeah,
believe.
let me just add one more point.
Sure, of course, Mike.
What I'm getting at is maybe Mr. McGovern, if he is successful at, getting used to that road, should post like a $500,000 bond with the town so that any event when that road gets destroyed and has to be rebuilt, if the utilities for the folks that live in County Court get destroyed because the trucks have crushed, the conduits or, whatever way the utilities were laid in, the water, the electric, the internet, and what's the other one? I think they have natural gas there. I'm not sure, but trucks going over that road, destroying it. Are the utilities off to the side? How far off to the side are the trucks going to be crushing that also? So I think he needs to post some money in order to keep, so the people in the town don't bear the cost of his destruction of that road.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just very briefly confirm that the applicant on this project is Tisdale Drive LLC, not Mr. McGovern. So if he doesn't mind the personal references, the continuous personal references, it's not a personal project. The applicant is Tisdale Land LLC. I think it's an important clarification.
You're the manager. You're the
important clarification.
That's correct. But listen, I don't. Tanya and Dylan. Tanya, actually, we heard from you at the last meeting about the road. I don't know if Dylan wants to speak to this or not. Dylan? And I.
Chairman, if I could just make one quick comment before Dylan does speak, I would greatly appreciate it. Just for clarification, because there's been so much discussion about the road access piece, right? And I think the board itself appears confused because 40B does not give your board jurisdiction over this issue, period. Okay. Mr. Reardon very eloquently stated, the roadway, the physical attributes of it, that is within your parameters to address.
Correct.
But you have no jurisdiction over
and thank you, but you have made that clear.
Okay, I just want to make sure the board is clear because the questions are being relayed
on the record. I don't want to reiterate this stuff.
Okay.
You made your point.
Thank you.
Dylan, would you like to speak, please?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Dylan Brown. I'm an attorney with Law Office Marcus Rico Emmer Brooks. We represent the County Court condominium. I guess generally we accept the fact that the ZBA doesn't have the authority to establish whether or not that the developer has access rights at Tisdale Drive, but we disagree with the contention that it can't be at least taken into consideration. Like any development permit, the applicant has, at a very bare minimum, needs to establish ownership interest in the property that they're going to be using. As we've stated time and time again during these hearings and in correspondence to the ZBA with the Developers Council, we think those access rights are absolutely called into question. And while this matter will likely be litigated and a determination from the land court will be issued, I think at the very least that if the ZBA is going to go forward and approve this project, a condition should at least be put in place that access rights have at least been solidified, because it's an argument that's been raised by the developer why they have access rights, and it's based on relied easement rights, which we disagree with, but nonetheless, those access rights need to be solidified. But more importantly, there's also this contention that the ZBA can't also consider factors with respect to health and safety that we particularly disagree with, and that has to do with water quality and water supply standards. So as we've stated again, that this area of the town of Dover has had water issues with groundwater and insufficient water supply. for years on end. And just to remind the ZBA of what their obligations are under Chapter 40B, the Zoning Board of Appeals can issue or grant a comprehensive permit provided that the project is consistent with local needs. That standard requires a balancing of the need for affordable housing in the town of Dover against the health and safety impacts that project's going to have on the surrounding community. And I understand the Developers Council's argument, but I can't think of much more impact that health and safety could pertain to if we're talking about water quality and the water supply that's going to be funded to this project, as well as the adjacent condominium. If that water system or that water supply is called into question, that is certainly a consideration that the Zoning Board of Appeals needs to take into consideration with respect to whether or not we're going to be granting a comprehensive permit. That is health and safety. It's the health and safety, not only the residents of the apartments and the tenants who are going to be residing in there, but more importantly, the condominium residents who resided there for years on end. So we disagree that those factors cannot at least be taken into consideration. And if there's a ruling on the access issue, sure, we're going to have a determination one way or another, but there shouldn't need to be a ruling on impacts of water, because those are certainly what have to do with health and safety of the residents of, again, not only apartments, but the adjacent condominium. The other issue and we've had some, beneficial conversations with the developer, with the Board of Trustees and their property management, but parking, I believe, is an issue. And I think it was raised by Mr. Reardon and other members of the board. 65 parking spaces for 42 apartments is just not sufficient. I understand that we may be relying upon a zoning bylaw that could relate to 1.5 parking spaces for this apartment complex, but the parking plan is simply inadequate. The developer, the landlord, property management, whoever's going to be managing this property can put whatever language that they want in lease agreements. They can hire a towing company. They could have the area police, but the impact's going to be there. There's simply not enough parking with the apartment complex. They will spill over onto condominium property because it directly abuts that property. There's visitor parking, there's unit owner parking. There's nowhere else to go because parking isn't permitted along Tisdale Drive. So that certainly needs to be taken into consideration. And if there's not sufficient parking on site, the only other alternative is to reduce the size of the project. If you reduce the size of the project, say by half or a substantial amount, the amount of parking becomes readily available. And this is a major concern for the association, the Board of Trustees, because it's not like we're talking about single family or studio apartments. There could be upwards of 3-bedroom apartments that can be housed within this community. And no family has one car. Especially in the town of Dover, where the public transportation isn't readily available. These folks are going to be driving to and from their jobs every day. And if we're talking about family, those kids are eventually going to have cars one day. So it's very likely at a minimum that 3 cars per bedroom could be used in an apartment of this magnitude and this size. So we would strongly urge the consultants to take that into consideration, because it's simply just the density problems and the impact that it's going to have on our clients who are directly about this project is going to be detrimental if this thing is constructed the way it's currently.
Thank you. And again, those are concerns of the board. At this stage, we really want to hear from the peer review consultants who deal with these. But it's not, all of us hope that this will not just be reciting some boilerplate treatise. There are some special issues with any development as far as topography and usage. So yeah, we're really hoping from our peer review consultants to get a very rational and fair appraisal within what 40B allows or requires. Okay, so Tanya, I assure you, we're not going to issue things that are flagrantly, in ignorance of what 40B requires. And again, your letters on that have been, they're in the record and will be respected. But these are important issues. Are there any other questions from the board? And if not, how about, let me see here. If anyone else on the panel wants to say something, fine. And if not, we'll allow some questions from the audience. And hopefully they won't just be reiterating the issues that we're hearing up here and have been hearing. Avi, did you raise your hand? Yes, I think
All
you
right,
raised.
no, so only to alert you that Ezra and Sean both have had their hands raised for a bit
Thanks, Tom.
before you open it up to the.
Okay, you know,
We
Just
tried the
being-
manual
being
method
helpful.
too.
and unfortunately, well, we're still coordinating this. One of our town employees is, really in charge of seeing those things. I don't see them on my screen, but go ahead.
Yeah, don't worry at all, George. You're doing great. It's a lot to manage here. Ezra Glenn, the town's 40B consultant from MHP. Again, I just wanted to remind everyone, I think this sort of discussion, many of these issues are very real issues and do need to be looked at. And I think I'd agree with George that, and with Sean, that absolutely they do need to be looked at, and that you have every right to worry about parking adequacy, the adequacy of the access for emergency vehicles, construction impacts, all that sort of stuff. But I just want to remind everyone that there's sort of a general process that I think George had laid out that we really would like to follow, which is first, let's just make sure we have all the information and the peer reviewers are kind of comfortable knowing we even have a project. What does this project look like? And then we sort of move down through. So it can be very frustrating in this early stage because I think we tend to, as Americans and as New Englanders, tend to want to raise an issue and have it addressed right away. And I think some of what we need to trust is we can raise an issue and put a pin in it and remember that there's a bunch of people here who are all taking notes, and we're going to be sure by the time we get to the end, every one of them has been addressed. The developer has been told, you need to look at this, or we need to be comfortable with this. And if there's an issue that we haven't addressed, we slap a condition on by the very end. And if we can't come up with a condition to solve the problem, then we slap a denial on it. That's sort of the 40B process: is identify the issues, resolve them. Anything you can't, you condition. Anything you cannot figure a way to make it work, you've got a denial. But I think these points, for example, about impacts to the road during construction, that's a fairly standard one. We often deal with it pretty late in the process because we don't even know, how big of a building they might be building and how much impact or how many access roads or what. But that will be something to look at. And the same with parking. It'll be great at some point to sort of say, what's the overall parking plan? But that might not even be finalized if it turns out, Sean's point about Title V systems or landscaping intrudes in this way or that way, or we move the buildings around. So that, just to sort of put it out there, I think right now we're taking notes, identifying issues. Hopefully, in the next month we'll have a clearer set of plans and studies, and then we'll start ticking them off. Thanks, George.
Thank you. No, that's exactly it. Our peer review consultants need to get to work with the developer and and then let us know when we are ready for another meeting. Now, we will have to, just the process, we will schedule another session of this, which, and hopefully that will, let me just ask you, Sean, assuming that you and I'm addressing this to Paul also, if your teams coordinate, when will we have something really with more detail to address? Because this is a first shot, so that we can maybe now just schedule the next session around when you think things will be ready for us to look at. And bear in mind, again, our 180 days goes only until early May.
Yeah, I would say anything less than a month would be, I think, too aggressive to be productive. Attorney Brown brings up a very interesting point, right? So to the extent that water quality is concerned, the only way we can evaluate that is we need to know what the infrastructure is serving the development. So right now, they just show a water line connecting out in the street in Tisdale Drive. I don't know whether that's a shared water line with the adjacent development. I don't know if that's a public water line. We have to understand the infrastructure and the full extent of that infrastructure that's either shared or is under local control in order to sort of qualify any sort of commentary. So my emphasis right now is compiling as much of the information that we need to make good decisions and resolve issues. Because without that information, all we can do is talk about it and identify it as a problem, but not ever get to a point of closure. So I'm going to push Paul and his team to get as much of this information to us as quickly as possible, and I'll help him prioritize that information.
Yeah.
Number one for us is to understand the physical infrastructure that they are connecting to, utility infrastructure, transportation infrastructure, all the way out to Route 9. I'm sorry, all the way out to Route 109. So we want to understand how they are getting from their project to 109. If they get to 109, we can pretty much conclude from there that they can get wherever they need to from that point. But until they show us how they're getting from their driveway to Route 9, in our mind, there's going to be a question as to whether they've done their work.
And that tends to provide a nice phasing also of the review as we move through it, that there's these sort of issues around like the utilities and the traffic and the emergency access. How does outside the site get to the site? That might be probably the first thing we'd really start to check off. Once that's clear, then you move into the site with things like stormwater, the Title V compliance, parking, and then you move from that into things like landscaping and screening and so I think that kind of sets up a process that might be 3 or 4 months, but ideally, what did we just say, Sean? Sort of 3 weeks after you get everything you need from Paul would be a reasonable time for the board to meet again.
Yeah, by that time I'd be able to sort of respond to their responses and their new information and be at a point to sort of have the same level of discussion, but to a finer point.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
From our point of view, there probably is going to be a sequence to how it gets submitted as well. Some of the information we already have, some of the information like doing surveys right out as far as Route 109 is going to take a little bit of time. So obviously we can provide the information that we have currently immediately, but some of it is going to take some time to prepare. Not a lot, but some of it is going to take a certain amount of time to prepare.
Okay. President's Day is Monday, February 17th. I don't know if we have, and I'm not sure when the kids get their week off, or anyone here has kids that are, I know, not here. Listen, you could be the expert on this. If I certainly be scheduling something before February 17th, just a month from now, that's too early. And so we should be, I think, looking at something after President's Day, February 17th. Does that week or the week after, so that we're still in February, would that make sense for scheduling?
Yeah.
Okay,
How about Wednesday, the 19th?
that would be fine with me, unless people are taking that week off.
It's school vacation week, if it matters.
That
is school vacation week in Dover, I believe.
Okay, Nadir, I don't want to schedule this when you are off with kids.
No, I could be available then.
Okay, but we could do it the 26th if you wanted.
No, I think sooner is better than later.
Okay, well, okay. Would you want to do the 19th?
Yes.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay, great. Everyone else, does Wednesday the 19th look okay? And before that, we will have something from Sean and with Cliff, where we're able to really have some details, and then from there get on to the next part of it.
I have a comment for Dylan Brown.
Yes, go ahead.
If you go to the town hall and you go through the records of Red Robin Pastures, you'll see that there's a lot of documentation there on the quality of the Colonial Water Company and what they were providing, and legitimate complaints from customers about orders not to bathe or not to consume the water. and other problems with the Colonial Water Company that was bought out by the Aquarium Water Company. And I can tell you that Mr. McGovern didn't care. And in this instance, he probably won't care either. But if you want
Can
to
we
look,
back off on the personal accusations here, please?
if you want to look at, documentation that was given during Red Robin Pastures, there's a lot of it there because the former chairman entered it into the record.
Well, listen, here's the thing though about water. This is a water company. It's regulated by the state. And if it sees fit, and this is more of a legal consulting question, but if a regulated utility basically says it can provide the water, I'm not sure what authority we have, Mike. It's certainly something we're going to look at.
No, I understand. He'll, if he gets a will serve letter from Aquarian, I mean, case closed, nothing you can do about it. But, the people from Tisdale and, people on Draper Road and Saddle Ridge and Colonial and Walpole Street that are on the same spigot as this new project,
Yeah,
they're going to suffer. It's going to happen again.
it's
I don't know what the Aquarium Water Company's done to upgrade and to draw from different aquifers or whatever, but it's going to happen again. And as Dylan said, people's health are on the line.
it will have to be looked at, and to the extent we have authority, and again, what we don't want to do is have a decision which on its face causes the Housing Appeals Committee to just throw us out. So we've got to be sensitive to this. But again, as a 40B project, we're all going to go by the appropriate guidance that we get from our legal counsel, and with the benefit of the review of the peer review experts. Okay, I think here, who else? Does anyone else have their hand up? I see Sean. Sean, are you going to speak some more? Or
Yeah, I was just hoping to ask a question or a favor of Attorney Brown. If you have, do you have any information as to what the sort of the parking allocations are for your tenant? So, I mean, ideally, at a minimum, we'd like to use that as a standard for this project. If your project is 2 spaces per unit, I think that certainly supports a similar sort of expectation on this project. Do you know what the county court parking allocation is?
Off the top of my head, Mr. Rader, and I don't, but I can absolutely gain that information for you. The association likely has a parking plan if it's not already set forth in the master deed with the plans that are recorded with it. I'm happy to provide you with that information.
Yeah, that would be very helpful for our review. Yes.
great.
I have several friends that live there, and what they have is 2 parking spaces. One of them is in the garage, and one of them is the first spot out of the garage. That's so they all have 2 parking spaces, not really what you'd like it to be, but one in, one out.
And just to clarify, they are townhouses, they are not apartments.
Correct. They're condominium units, but Mr. Rader, to further Ms. Lavelle's point, there are individual garages. So most residents park in the garage, and they have a driveway leading up into that individual garage. There is visitor parking as well, but I'll provide you with a parking plan and everything that's set forth in the governing docs. It's not a problem.
Excellent.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be anything fancy. Just any information is good information.
Absolutely.
Okay. Is there anyone anyone else who wishes to speak? I don't see any digital hands. Okay, I think then we can adjourn this session of the hearing, and we can meet again on February 19th at 7 p.m. And professionals, just send stuff to me as soon as you develop things, and I will continue to get our website up to date and share that with board members. Although we don't, again, for the record, we don't confer over email. All we will do with email is forward documents that we receive. Okay, I think that's great. We're a little ahead of schedule now. And
Thank you.
what we need to do now, board members, we just have minutes from our last meeting.
Do you need a vote to just continue the hearing to?
I thought a chairman itself could do that, but Ezra, if you recommend,
Well, whatever you normally do, but
Yeah.
just so you're doing that.
yeah, no, normally, at least I've only been here
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chairman. Motion to continue the meeting for February 19th at 7 p.m.
Okay, second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Nadir Ahmed in favor.
okay, yeah, I think, yeah, we all have to roll call also, so, yeah, but I think, and I'm happy to do this, but I don't think we need votes, for this. Okay, let us go on to the next thing, which is these minutes, and I'm going to see about sharing my screen if I'm able to do that properly.
Mr. Chair, you're done with me, right?
Yes, I am. I'm done with you. Okay.
See you guys in a month.
Thanks so much.
You bet. Hey, that's great. And Sean, thank you. This is really helpful.
Thank you for your time, everybody. Thank you. Have a good night.
You bet. Hey, so long. And let's just see here. Where is the screen sharing thing here? For Pete's sake. Oh, there it is. Okay. Hang on. Okay, and let's see here. Okay, these are the minutes I circulated to all of us. I did get a few comments, but unless there is anyone who wishes to discuss, I think a motion to accept these would be fine.
So moved.
Thank you, Mike. Mike, you're our trigger man. And okay.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Nadir
Okay.
in favor.
Good. And George Samantha, yes, I think this we need to give our names as we say this. So Laverne Lovell said aye.
Aye.
Yes, okay. And Nadir's already said so. Michael, you just got to say your name into the recording, I think.
Mike Donovan, aye.
Okay, and George Cemento, aye. So we're all set with these. And then the next thing, let's just see here. I think our next thing is at 8:40. We have Vinny O'Brien here. And is Vinny still here, I hope?
Yes, I am.
Okay, Vinny, we can get to you actually earlier than 8:40. And for background here, this is technically not a hearing.
Correct.
Yeah, the Meadows of Dover is an approved 40B project. And according to the regulations, if there's an application to do something that is insubstantial to the project, that the board has 20 days from the application to make a decision. If, however, we consider it to be a substantial change, then what we have to do is schedule a public hearing.
Correct.
So that's how the 40B regulation works. So this is really involving 4 condominium units, and in this project, which has more than 20 units. I'm not sure how many exactly. Vinny, give us some information. Earn your fee, buddy. Okay.
I'd be glad to. So I believe the only member of the board that was part of this process was Vern.
Yeah.
And Laverne may recall that we had a total of 28 meetings getting this together. And there was, it was one of the first big 40Bs in town, so he was given to it. If you notice on that plan, most of the units they're not lots, but there are lines around these units, and those are what are called exclusive use areas. So most of the lots have little backyards or little side yards. The units that I'm talking about actually have almost no side yard and have no backyard.
Yeah.
During the permitting process, when we started with 36 units, and in an effort to, for lack of a better word, appease an abutter, we reduced it from 36 down to 24 units, and we did a lot of things in that regard. When we got close to the final decision, that neighbor, who was Jimmy Snyder, great guy, neighbor, good friend, had requested from the board that no decks be on these units. So these units in that decision prohibited decks. No other unit has a similar prohibition. So what has happened since then that allows us or makes us think we should come before the board at this time? Since this was approved back in, I can't even remember when, 2007 or 8, somewhere around there, Jimmy Snyder has sold his property, and the property is now currently owned by the town, and it's basically open space. And I think I'm not sure if this board's been involved, but many of the boards in town have been involved about creating trails and walking trails and things of that sort along this property. So since Jim is no longer in a butter, he would no longer object to this as an abutter. And since it's all open space on the other side of these decks, and it's owned by the town, we didn't think anyone would object at all. Now, that's kind of the history of the project and why these decks weren't allowed. They were on the original plan, but we took them off to get the plan approved and to avoid an appeal. There were appeals, but ultimately it was resolved and it's been built. And I think it's actually a very attractive 40B if you've actually seen it, and it works very well as a cohesive unit. So the members and the trustees of the association have no objection to this. Their only requirement, if it is approved, is that it meets all the other standards of the subdivision as far as design criteria and, you know, fitting in with the design of the condominiums generally, but they were in support of this proposal. So that's kind of the history of the project and why the decks weren't allowed in the first instance. Now, I did provide George, and I assume he shared some of this information with the members.
Yes.
What constitutes an insubstantial change versus, let's say, an amendment? If Laverne recalls, and the other members might not have been aware, when this was first approved, actually, you know what, it was approved probably in 2005 or so. In 2005, when this plan was approved, it had a restriction, and the restriction was that it had to be 55 and older. And in 2007 or so, a couple of the units got sold, and I think everyone might recall what happened in 2008. In 2008, the market crashed. The original developers failed because of inability to sell. And after that, the bank took over. We got another buyer to come in. Greg Rafter, Mark Howe came in, and they had a substantial change. And that substantial change was to eliminate that restriction. And the restriction was to eliminate the requirement of 55 and older. So in that instance, we were obligated to file before the board, reopen the public hearing, have, you know, do the whole thing, because that was a substantial change, getting rid of that restriction. In this particular instance, the board has the right to make a finding that the change is substantial or insubstantial. And there are some, well, there they are. There are,
actually, I'll show you right here.
Yeah,
These
right
are the examples in the regulation of substantial and not substantial.
So, you know, one of the things they find insubstantial is to decrease the area of the units or the total number of units by more or less than 10%. We're not impacting any of the unit counts, the size of the units. We're not, you know, one of the examples they use here is, you know, the color, style, and materials. That's kind of the insubstantial change we're making. We're not changing the number of bedrooms. We're not changing the number of units. We're not changing the number of affordable units. We're just requesting this minor change to allow decks that were on the original plan, but as an accommodation to enable we moved removed from the plan. That neighbor is no longer an issue, so we're requesting that the board just make a finding that this is basically a de minimis issue, has no impact on the comprehensive permit per se. It doesn't do anything regarding, as they say, the number of units or affordable units, and that's kind of the proposal.
Can I ask what's the percentage change in square foot if you added the deck to the total square foot of any of those units?
Those are huge units, just by the way.
Yeah.
I
Big.
think those particular units average about 5,000 square feet.
Okay. So
the
then
deck-
that's less than 10% then.
it gives it an outdoor space. There's no outdoor space. And the part of the reason is decks versus patios. This property on that rear lot line drops off. So you really don't have the ability to have like a walkout basement or something like that. And the living areas on the back side, this is the second floor. Basically, in the front is the first floor, and the back side is just the second floor. These decks would just be looking, there's an existing vegetated barrier that really don't have much of a view at all, but at least they have a place to be outside, to sit outside, where most of the other units either have a small backyard or a side yard. As you notice, some of the units have decks, some of the units have patios, but most of them have more area around them than these do. Number 8 is the only one that has a little bit of an area. The rest are pretty much square.
And you said that the town now owns it. Has anybody inquired with the town whether there is any objection from the new abutter, or? I don't even know how to.
I mean, I don't see Jimmy's. I don't remember the total amount of acreage, but it's pretty substantial. And when you leave our property line, as you head towards Jimmy's, there's a lot of area that eventually there's a stream, and then you get, to the balance of the property. And along the back of his property, on the, say, southern end of that property, there's I believe, an existing horse trail that goes through there. So it's pretty far. The horse trail itself is pretty far away from our property. There's really no one that's going to be walking or coming near this directly. So again, but for him being in a butter, I don't think it would have ever been an issue.
Vinny, do all 4 of these people want to put a deck on, or might there be 2 decks or 3 decks, or who cares?
There's two that want to do it right away.
Okay, yeah.
One that's has wanted to do it. He's debating whether he wants to. One had always wanted to do it, but now he's putting his property up for sale. And what I didn't want to do is do 2 or 3, then have to come back to the board to do it again.
No, it's fine. I just didn't know if they were all just like.
That's right. No, all 4 of them are applicants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're all
Oh,
applicants.
okay, good. So they can
2
put
of
it on
them-
later. If they don't do it now, they can do it later. So no
That's
problem. Yeah.
Without having come back. So Bill Foster, who's I think the very first buyer and the longest owner on the property, it wants one, and George Webb is the other one. They're going to do it immediately. The other 2 gentlemen may not do it right away. One of them is thinking of putting the house on the market, and it certainly adds value from a marketable perspective if the future buyer can put a deck on the back.
Well, yeah, and it's to the extent anyone think that this is unsightly from Hawthorne Lane. I mean, you can't even see them from Hawthorne Lane, and
Correct.
and all the other units, or virtually all of them, have decks. Is that correct?
They either have decks or they have a backyard or a side yard. They get an area to be outside.
Okay.
These are the only ones that are, kind of, like I say, the back of these properties drop off. So you couldn't even put a patio out there. They substantially drop off.
Okay, so what is before us right now is really a vote, having looked at the plans and the location, and looking at the regulations. We're being asked to vote that these are not substantial changes. And clearly, we're not increasing the height of a building by 10% or increasing the number of units, reducing the size, changing the building type from, or from one form of housing tenure to another, so we're not becoming rental instead of ownership. These seem to be more not substantial change. Does anyone feel uncomfortable with the vote to say that we approve these as changes that are not substantial?
So moved. I think that sounds good.
Good. Laverne Level moves. Is there a
Well,
second?
oh, I think Mike wants to say something.
Is there anybody on this call that, that opposes us voting for this? Like anybody, from the public that's attending the meeting that needs to say something, or?
Probably not.
No.
Okay, good.
Okay.
No objections, right? Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Okay.
I second Laverne.
Thank you, Nadir. And okay, all in favor, let's do a roll call vote, starting with Laverne.
Laverne Lovell, yes.
Nadir.
Well,
Nadir Ahmed, yes.
Mike Donovan, yes.
And George Chimento, yes. Okay,
Thank you all very much.
thank you. We learn more about 40B every day.
Apparently, that's why I wanted to stick on the call. So,
Okay.
thank you for your time, everybody. Have a good evening.
Hey, take care.
Cheers.
That's great. Okay, the only other thing, okay, a couple of other things actually, and let me just see here. Let me just, we've got a couple other things that have just come in. And bear with me a minute. Let me just see here. Oops, no, it's not there. This just came in from Mr. Corrigan. It's an application for a variance. And I just want to be sure I give you the right address. Uh, 12 Oakley Road. So I'm going to, we've got some time to schedule this, but it's a variance on a building that needs a little extra space according to the building inspector. So I'll circulate these to you later, but I think this we'll be able to fit this in with that meeting we have later in February. And it doesn't look terribly complicated, but I'll get that all out to you. The only other thing was, we've got the town annual report, and they asked me to have a shot at it. And I thought it would be good in the past for the annual report. That it doesn't really say, it's got a lot of procedural stuff in it, how you apply for variances and stuff like that. But it really doesn't list the things that the board did in the last calendar year. And I thought that might be nice to have that. And so, so I kind of stayed with their template. I changed a few things, and we may even, you've got time on this, but I think I'd like to get rid of a lot of this procedural stuff. I don't think we really need that in the annual report. People who read this are going to, I think, be more interested in just knowing what
cases,
what we did, and also having it be shorter, because it really does go on and on, the one that's published presently. But this is where I need to tap your brains to be. I went through the minutes to what was done. And so the matters were the town's Noannet Brook culvert replacement project at Willow and Dedham. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, they did that. We did okay that.
Yes. And then we did okay that. I think, yeah, I saw that approval. Then there was a question about 3 Claybrook, where the planning board did a site approval. And then we issued a special permit for the accessory dwelling unit. And it looked, I think Carol Lisbon testified there. But that's what the minutes say. Approval of planning board site approval and issuance of special permit for an accessory dwelling unit at 3 Claybrook.
Okay.
Does that sound right?
I don't
It's
remember it.
it's what's in the minutes, but you know, it's but okay. So then the next one, well, this one I know about. This gets us into August. We approved the reconstruction of a grandfathered 2-unit dwelling.
Yep.
And then we gave a sideline variance at 62 Claybrook Road.
Yep.
We issued a special permit for short-term rentals, Airbnbs at 25 Dover Road.
Mm-hmm.
During this year, this is a big one, you know, rejecting that Trout Brook proposal with the 3 non-contiguous lots.
The scattered site.
Yeah. I asked Kristen about this, and she it's still up before before hack. You know, they decided they just needed a summary judgment, basically. You know, and the town's position is this non-contiguous stuff, you just throw it out. You don't even get into the merits of it. And, you know, of course, the developer thinks the town is wrong on the law. So we're waiting for that decision. I'll let you know as soon as we get that. And then, of course, the board's presently in a multi-session hearing for our 42 rental units in 8185 Tisdale. So that's basically, I think that from the minutes, I can tell that's what we did in 2024. Does anyone have any, did we do anything else?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, this is good. As you know, no one's going to read this anyway. we may as well have it. They're good. So I'll work on that. They've got some awfully nice people who volunteer their time to put this report together every year. It's
huge.
It's a lot of work. Okay. I think we could have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
That's it. You got it. Okay.
Second.
And all in favor? Okay.
Nadir Ahmed in favor.
I'm in favor.
Mike Laverne, and
I'm in favor. I'm leaving tomorrow for 3 weeks, so I'm glad this thing's not till the middle of February.
Where are you going?
Hey,
I'm going to Palm Springs to my sister's house.
Excellent.
California.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you're not going to where my brother-in-law used to live, which is Pacific Palisades.
Really? Did he get burned?
Yeah. Oh God, he's 80 years old, and he and his wife. This was the home they raised their kids in.
That's terrible.
Oh yeah, and it's just gone.
Sorry to hear that.
They're living in an Airbnb right now.
That's terrible.
I mean, what do you do at that stage of your? I don't know if they've got insurance or what, but well, we're adjourned. But boy, I'm glad. So you're going to a nice fireproof area. Good.
Yes. In the desert, there's no trees.
Oh, gee.
Trees.
Okay. Well, listen, this is great. As I get stuff, you know, on this, I'll be flipping them over to you, and we'll get Chris to put them on the website for us. And okay, everyone have a great time, especially you, Laverne.
Thank you. Thank you all. Be well.
You bet.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night.